We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Welcome, Megan. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. I do remember our pre-interview, and it was really interesting. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'm also going to just say that the one thing that we're going to talk about is how you came up with, and you'll share all the details about leading self process. Right? So why don't you introduce yourself? You have some great qualifications. This is really exciting. And then how you came up with this process.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. I'm really delighted to be joining you here today on your podcast. I've been really looking forward to it all week.
Thank you.
Megan North, I'm known as the overwhelm coach. So I work with women in business to help them overcome their overwhelm and to lead a balanced life. I'm also a coach, a facilitator, and a speaker. And this week, actually, I did a facilitation in a council, a large Sydney council, and facilitated an hour workshop on mental health and wellbeing for a team, which was really lovely. So they're the type of things that I do. I'm a certified health and wellness coach. I'm also a certified ThetaHealing practitioner. So I'm an energy healer. I have a master's certified practitioner and coach of neurotransformation therapy, which is, a lot of people can know it as NLP, but this just has a little bit of a tweak. And I have a Bachelor of Business major in HR, or Human Resource Management. And I'm also a mental health first aider.
Wow, that is so impressive. So, yeah, very impressive. So why don't we go ahead and start with your story and then how you created this process. This is really interesting.
Sure. So in 2000, so I've had a 35-year career in corporate, and the last 20 odd years has been in human resources. So I've coached and mentored over 10,000 leaders and employees, clients. So my skill is very much in leadership. I love working with leaders. I love watching leaders grow. I love watching people start as, say, a team lead or maybe a supervisor, and then they work their way up the ladder. So leadership is very innate in me. Excuse me. And it's a skill that I learned over my lifetime. And so in 2014, I was in a very, very dark place. Earlier that year, my mother had passed away, and both unexpectedly and suddenly. And being the youngest of 6 kids, that was quite a shock for the family. And I was dealing with I was dealing with quite a few things in my life at that time. So I was divorced. My ex-husband had gotten into a new relationship. I was still single. I was not in a job that I liked very much. Financially, I was quite stressed. And the biggest emotion that I was dealing with was the grief about losing my mum. And so I was in a pretty dark place. And there was a night in my life where I was in my apartment, and I was not sure if I wanted to carry on. And I know that a lot of people can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that evening, it was really interesting. I was standing in my lounge room, and just in the corner of my eye, a white light grabbed my attention. Now, being an energy healer, I'm quite open to different things that can happen. And so it distracted me, and I looked over at that light, and as I looked at it, it started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it started to draw me toward the light. And the energy of this, whatever it was, the ball of light, the ball of energy, was very mothering. It was beautiful. It was soft. And I knew it was my mum. And so she led me down the hallway and into my bedroom. And at this time, before she had turned up, I was hysterically sobbing. I was, not in a great place. But as she led me down the hallway, I laid on my bed and I started to calm down and I started to breathe properly. And I just knew, I could hear her saying, "It's okay. You'll be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And as I laid there, I started to really reflect on the moment and where I was and what was happening in my life. And I realized that I needed to lead myself. Like, this is up to me. If I need to shift what's going on with me, and you and I have talked about this before, it starts with us. It doesn't mean that the whole responsibility is on us in the sense of we can't not get help, but we have to make that decision. It's up to me. And so as I started to think through this, I started to think, well, hang on a minute, I'm an expert in leadership. Maybe I can lead myself out of this. And then leading self came out of this moment. And as I started to create leading self, it became really clear to me, particularly in those next few days, because I had really shifted from being in a very dark place to actually thinking that there was light. And there was literally light at the end of the tunnel for me at that night, in that night. It was my mum. So leading self, that's how leading self came around. So would you like me to teach the SELFF?
Yes.
Talk about that? Great.
Yes, please.
Okay. So self stands for, S is for sense, E is for emotion, L is for learn, and FF is future focused. And so if I break that down, S is if you're in a moment of overwhelm, and often when we get overwhelmed, we freeze. Like, that flight, fight, or freeze. Often in overwhelm, it's freeze because we just don't know what we want to do. So if we're in that moment, close your eyes maybe, but sense, like, what's the senses that are going off in your body at that time? What are you sensing? What can you see? What can you hear? What could you smell or taste? I know a lot of people talk about when things happen in their body, they can taste in their mouth. It's a weird taste. Or what are you feeling? What's happening in your body? For me, when I'm in overwhelm or when I'm in grief in particular, my ear rings. So that's kind of my trigger of, okay, maybe grief is coming up for me. So that's the sense. And this is the beginning of learning about your body as well, like really tuning in and having that awareness of self. So the S is for sense. And then the E is education. So it's about, sorry, it's not education, it's emotion. Sorry, I'm going already into learn. E is emotion. So when you're sensing that and things are going on, it's then, okay, well, what's the emotion that I'm actually dealing with here? It doesn't necessarily just mean one. You could be dealing with 5 or 6. But if you can identify the emotion and then name it, you've then given it, you're owning how you're feeling. And if you name it, then you can actually deal with it because you actually know what you're dealing with. So for me at that time, grief was a big thing. So then what I did was, okay, so I'm sensing my ears ringing. This is definitely grief. So that's the emotion that I'm dealing with. And then L is for learn. So I then went off and learned everything I could about grief. So not just what does it do to your body or how does it make you feel, what are the positives and the negatives, but also what other things are around me? What other help can I get? Can I get some counselling? Is there someone I know that could point me in the right direction? Is there community groups around me? Is there grieving groups and counsellors? Learn everything about the emotion, but then what is the help that you can get in relation to that? Because this is all going in your little toolkit. I keep putting all the, I talk about my little toolkit that I take along. Okay, so I've sensed, I know how it comes along in my body, and then I know what the emotion is. Now I've learned, okay, right, this is what it does, and this is where I can go with it. And then the FF is future focused. So when that emotion comes up again, I get my little toolkit and I open it up and I go, okay, what tools do I need today to deal with this emotion? And it's the interesting thing is that I love the process in the sense of I became very aware of myself, and not just around grief, but then of every emotion that I deal with. And it's once you start to use it, it becomes quite quick, because you're like, okay, yep, because you're starting to understand your body. You know that, okay, I'm a bit angry today. I can feel it in my foot. Well, what does that mean? What does anger in your foot mean? And so you start to really become aware of everything that's happening in your body. But it also means that you can quickly move through your emotions. And I'm not saying quickly move through from a dismissive point of view. I'm saying you can quickly move through it, because you go, okay, it's this. Okay, I know what the emotion is. I know what tools I need. Okay, great. Let's move through. And then we can. So I'm not the type of person that would say, use this so that you just never feel an emotion, because we're humans. We're always going to feel emotion. But it's how can you deal with it? So say if you're sitting at work and all of a sudden I have this huge amount of grief come over me, okay, what are the tools that I need to just help me while I'm sitting here? Now, depending on where you work, you may feel comfortable enough to fall in a heap on the floor and fall into a crumble, but I don't think that many people would like to do that.
Maybe at the home office.
Yeah, maybe at home office, exactly. Yeah, but it's just that it's a tool that starts to become really self-aware, gives you beautiful tools to use for yourself. But then I always say to people, teach it to your children, your family, your friends. I had a girlfriend that texted me last week and said, I was out with the girls last night and I taught them leading self, because one of them was having a moment. And so it's just a simple tool that you can use that I think that has great benefit for you.
Yes, I agree. And, I was thinking, when you're going through the emotion part, and especially in the trauma arena, there tends to be the most prominent emotion is anger.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that there's more emotions underneath that anger. And so, and so many people I've talked to, and, that is the number one emotion that they feel. And so how would you get someone past that, to get past the anger, or at least figure out from the anger what really that emotion is? Because like you said, for you, it was grief.
I think the thing is, though, I had grief, but then I had many other things underneath that. But grief was the biggest emotion that I was dealing with. Once I could work with the grief and understand it and learn how I could regulate it, then actually all the other emotions underneath it started to show up. So I was like, oh, okay, so now that I've dealt with my grief, what's the next thing that I need to deal with? And so it's actually often, and I would suspect with trauma, trauma would probably be the big one that most people are dealing with, or there's usually a bigger emotion that's then masking a lot of others underneath. So if we're talking about anger, if you can actually work with that anger, and you can go, okay, I now know how it's showing up in my body. I know what the negative and positive effects it's going to have with me. Not necessarily positives, but maybe there are. Okay, yep, okay, I've got these tools. I need to breathe. I need to do this. I need to walk away, Then I think the effect of that emotion gets less. So yes, you go into anger, but then you've got your tools. So then you come out of anger quickly. And then that actually starts to shine a light on, okay, well, what else is under there? It could be grief. A lot of the time under anger is grief. Because you're grieving sadness, loneliness. There'd be many other emotions under that. So once you start to deal with your bigger one, that is actually the biggest part of your life, and you start to get that in control, then you can start to work on the smaller ones. Because I think one of the things that we put so much pressure on ourselves. My niece, she has a beautiful saying, and sometimes she says to me, Auntie Megan, are you shuddering all over yourself again today? Because I say, I should be doing this, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. And I think what happens is that when we're in a moment of overwhelmed, grief, we're angry, we think that then all of a sudden we've got, okay, well, I've got this awareness that maybe I need to start doing some work on myself, but then we expect that it's going to be fixed straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And actually there's a process. Look, I've been doing work on myself for probably 20 years. And I'm only 49, so I've got a long journey to go on in relation to that.
Yes.
And I think that, and you and I have talked about this too, is that it's never too late to start working on yourself. There's always going to be something to work on, but I think it's just about stepping back and going, okay, this is the major part of my life that's happening at the moment that I need to work on. And then what's next? And then what's next? It's a never-ending journey, but it does get easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking about the word overwhelm, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit because, for years I was overwhelmed and didn't know it. And I lived my life completely overwhelmed all the time and was wondering why I was so tired, and I've, for me, what I've done once I became aware of that I do get overwhelmed easily, I can, I've learned how to better manage that and not allow myself to get overwhelmed. Or if I do have my tools that help me to bring it back down. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what is being overwhelmed? What could be examples of being overwhelmed? Because some people don't understand, we throw these words around. I want people to understand, what does that mean when you feel overwhelmed?
Okay. So, well, my example is the perfect example. I was grieving. I was divorced. I was stressed with money. And for me, it felt like you've got that emotion, then that one comes on, then that one comes on, then that one comes on. And this is how I explain it when I do some in-person events. I go, that's exactly what I feel like my brain is doing when I'm in overwhelm. Like, it's exploding. It literally cannot deal with anything else. It explodes, but then it freezes, as we talked about before. So I think overwhelm can mean something different to everybody. And one of the things that I work with my clients, particularly the women in business, is I don't have children. So I would never try to relate to how they feel having children, because that's impossible for me to understand. But I know with a lot of my clients that I work with, they feel like everything is on them. They've got to be managing a house, their children, their partner, have a corporate job, bringing in more money. And then they start to feel like they're a failure if things aren't going well, or if the kids are mucking up, or if they didn't get that promotion. It's this constant pressure on ourselves. And you know what? We really do put it on ourselves. No one else is sitting there. Like, my husband doesn't sit there and say, well, what did you do this week? Oh, can't believe you didn't do this, this, and this. He would say, wow, you've achieved so much this week. I've seen that you've been really busy. Whereas for me, I'd be thinking, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. And, it's the pressure on ourselves. And so one of the things I do group coaching with women, and it's called Leading Self Foundation Program. So, and one of them is awareness of self. So it's about, how do you become aware of what's going on and how you're dealing with those things? But the first thing that we deal with is boundaries. Boundaries are so important. And particularly when we're talking about overwhelm, because when I start to break it down with my clients, I say to them, oh my gosh, do you realize that you're saying yes to everybody, but not to yourself? You're saying yes to this person, this, and all the way down the bottom of your, say, 30-person list is you. And I think that that's when we start to get that, and we start to put ourselves at the bottom of the list, I think overwhelm can really take over, because all of our needs aren't being met, because we are so stressed and worried and putting the pressure on ourselves to meet the needs of everybody else. But actually it starts with us. If I'm in a great place, if I'm looking after myself and giving myself some self-care and having time to myself and having moments of reflection and quiet, then actually I can be a better version for everybody else anyway.
Yeah. And, and I've learned for myself, I've identified, and I love this because the theme that keeps coming up is self-awareness, right? And feeling it in your body. And it keeps coming up. And it's so true, because that is my check off now, is I can feel it in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I take a step back and, you know, assess what's going on. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I do take some time. I just take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens with me in my head, like you said, and then it's just jumbles. It's just all these thoughts going through my head, and none of it makes sense. I can't grab onto any of the thoughts. It's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have learned as well is part of this used to be perfectionism, but if I got into doing something and I got overwhelmed because I looked at the whole picture, right? And we do need to kind of take a look at the whole picture, but I would get stuck on that whole picture. And all of a sudden it'd be like, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff I got to do. And it would shut me down. It would be just too much. My brain would just completely shut down. And so what I've learned to do is go, okay, yep, there's the whole picture. So what's the priority? What's the first little piece I can chip off that will make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have baby steps in my life in a lot of different areas. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that's what I look to. I look to, okay, here's the whole picture. Okay, good. Okay, now what's the priority? Okay, now what's the first step I can take to move in that direction? And yeah, that's the only way I can do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And anything is better than nothing. So, you know, as a health and wellness coach, it was funny because when I was doing my facilitation session this week, one of the ladies asked me in the group, she said, so what is the she didn't say perfect, but she said, what's the recommended how much exercise that you should do in a day? And I said to her, I'm not going to answer that because it depends on you. And I said, anything is better than nothing. If all you can manage through a day is to get out in the sun, or if it's snowing or if it's raining, whatever it is, but actually at least go outside, have some air on your face, and maybe have 5-minute break or a quick walk around the block or around your desk or anything, or your apartment or your house, is better than not doing anything at all.
That's right.
And so it's those small things. And I'm not sure, Lisa, have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
No, Atomic Habits?
Atomic Habits. And it's been a bit of a game changer for me. And I'm a bit slow with the uptake because I think it's been around for a long time. But he talks about then that habit stacking. So he talks about stacking a new habit on an existing habit. So one of the things that I talk to some clients about is, okay, so if you're at your desk all day, particularly for people who work from home a lot, if you're sitting at your desk all day and you've got back-to-back meetings, how do you get more movement into your day? So do some stretches that moves your body. If you're on so many meetings and there's one meeting sort of say every hour that you could quickly go off camera for maybe a minute or two, quickly turn your camera off, do a quick few laps around your desk because you're up and you're moving. And so that's a habit stack. But the other thing that is, if you go into the kitchen to put the kettle on, turn the kettle on, walk outside, stand in the sun or the breeze, and then come back. And then that's a new habit that you're stacking onto a habit. So normally the habit would be you'd put the kettle on and you'd either stand there and wait, or you'd look at your phone. Most people would. Or you would, I don't know, I mean, some people zip out and put the washing on the line. That's great because it's moving. But what are the small incremental things that you can put on something that is already something in your life? So it's a normal sort of habit, I guess. And what are the new things that you can stack on? And so it's a really great way to just put little bits and pieces into your day. Now, if you can put an hour in your diary and go for an hour walk through a day, fantastic.
Right.
But I think, again, there's so much pressure on us to what's the recommended. I always say anything is better than nothing.
I agree.
A conscious breath, doing a deep conscious breath, breathing in, holding it and letting it out. That great. You've done something for yourself and you've actually given your brain a break for a few seconds, if that's all you can manage in the day.
Yeah. One of the things that I've added is I bought a little trampoline.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, because you can get caught up sitting at your desk. You know, I literally have to set my timer a lot because I can get caught up if I'm working on a project, I can get really sucked into it.
Yeah.
And then, you stand up about an hour later, you're like, whoa, so I set a timer, but especially before the podcast, I do have a little routine. But one of the things I do is I'll get on there and I'll bounce for about at least a minute, kind of get the energy going. And I've done that. And it's so funny. No, I have not read that book, but I've done, and I'm implementing the things that you say, like when I like adding, a break and, work for 25 minutes, get up, go outside. Don't sit there and sit back and get on my phone, but get up and go outside and get some fresh air and move around and do something where there's movement. Yes. And it's just the little steps, and you'll see those little steps start adding up and adding up and adding up. And next thing you know, you've made big changes in your life, because those really add up and make big changes in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that social media, unfortunately, has good and bad about it. And I think that people post a lot of things on social media that then we think, oh, I should be, or why am I not as good as that person? And I think that definitely attributes to overwhelm as well. And I know a friend of mine, when she had a little boy, and she said to me, it's really interesting. I look on Facebook or Instagram and I see the mothers in my mother's group who are putting all these pictures up, smiling and amazing, all their hair and makeup's done. But she said when they come to mother's group, they do not look like that. They are so tired. But she said no one is willing to speak up and talk about how they're actually feeling, really. And I think that that's really sad, because we feel like that we have to portray on social media that actually life is really amazing. And it's actually something that I need to get better at as well, because being a mental health advocate, if I'm having a crappy day, I probably should get onto social media and say, hey, today hasn't been a great day, but this is what I've done about it. Because then I'm actually really being a shining light to people to actually be vulnerable and to be honest about how I'm feeling. Now, I don't have those moments very often, but it's maybe I could be a little bit more of a trailblazer, to be a little bit more vulnerable. But I just think that there's so many expectations that we've got to be here, when actually a lot of the time you ask these people and they're miserable, they're not happy. They may have a lot of money and they may look like that their life is in check, but a lot of the time you find out that it's not.
That's exactly how I used to live my life. And people can't connect to that. They can't connect to someone who, when someone isn't real or doesn't, constantly, you can't connect with them. And honestly, I mean, I can remember, as you're talking about that, I can remember myself that I made sure the outside looked good, because the inside was not. I was in a lot of pain, and it was easier to focus on the outside than to address the deep stuff going on within me.
And look, I think also, Lisa, you and I talked about this before. I think the thing that's really important is, and I know this from being a coach, but I also know this from being an energy healer, until you're ready to make the change, there's nothing that anyone can tell you that's going to change that. So I was inspired by people, and sometimes someone can say that one thing, it can trigger you and go, oh my gosh, I really need to make this change. Yeah. But when my clients come to me for both coaching or healing, the healing and the change has already happened, because they've made that decision. They've that awareness of self has come in. Until I could have been told maybe 1,000 times by people that actually you're not in a great place. Well, not a lot of people actually knew I wasn't in a great place, because I had this facade. But until I was ready to make that change, until I was ready to face it, then, it's your journey. I can't be told, and I can't sit here and tell people, well, you don't look that great. You need this, this, and this, and this. Who am I to tell them? All I can do is just talk about my experience and share my story, like you do as well. And hopefully we're a beacon of light for people that actually start to think about what's going on for them in their life.
That brings up it reminds me of a story that this really caught my attention. And I had done at that point, and this was probably, a good maybe 20 years ago. I had done some healing here and there, but not as much as I have done in the last like 13 years. But at this point, there was a lot of drama in my life, and I was a big part of it. And this one particular lady, I loved, I still know her. I mean, I'm still in contact with her. I love her to death. And I was in a women's group, and I was going over to her house, and I just, every time I saw her, I always had a story of what was going on now. Right. And I went over to her house, and I remember she opened the door, and I'm just like, you wouldn't believe what's happening now. I don't even know if I said hello to her, honestly, but it's like, you wouldn't believe what's happening now. And I just started to kind of start the story. And she says, wow, every time I see you, you have something going on, or a story, or, I don't remember her exact words, but I got what she said. And at first it like hit me hard. It was like, wow, that hurts. But you know what? I still think about that. And she was right. And that got my attention, because I was so locked in on this. You got to hear my story. Here I am, because I was in such victim mode. And I needed to be snapped out of it. And it worked. I mean, it really kind of made me, at first I was hurt, of course, and was, felt like, oh, how could she say that? How could she, doesn't she know, but it made me think about it enough that I went, okay, wait a minute. And I started thinking about, all the times I saw her, I'm like, you know what? She's right. She's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that she said it with love, because the way that you call that story, I love that there is love behind there, which is beautiful. Like, what a beautiful gift she gave you.
Yes. I actually sent her a card a few years later.
Yeah.
And that touched her so much. I mean, every time I saw her, she's like, that card is still on my refrigerator. It's like, those moments can be painful, but if you slow down, and I had to get out of the victim mindset and not look at it like she was being mean to me, which is my MO usually. But instead kind of go, ooh, why did she say that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But she definitely said it with love, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting, because I'm sure that you experience this too. When you start to put boundaries in place, a lot of people in your life fall away.
Yes.
You actually find who are the actual, the real friends, the real family, the people that truly love you for who you are, as opposed to people who have just been there to get things from you, take your energy, and that sort of thing. And it's one of the things when I work with my clients, is to say, it's a reason we work with boundaries straight up, because if we don't work with boundaries from the first week, none of the other stuff is going to work, because it's then I'm wanting them to turn into themselves and be aware of themselves, and how are you making decisions, and what's your self-care routine, and those sort of things. If we haven't dealt with boundaries first, all of that won't work, because they're not going to have the space, and they're also not going to be surrounded by the right people
to support them.
Correct. Yeah. And look, it's really interesting. I still have people that come into my life, and I spend time with them. I then realize and get a little bit more aware of what is this relationship about, and you tune into that. I'm very self-aware, so my intuition is very strong, and being a healer as well, of course it is. But with my relationships, I'm like, okay, I'm actually seeing this person differently to what I saw them, say, a year ago. And what do they actually really want from me? What is happening? Well, they're taking a lot of my energy. And when I finish with them, I'm very drained. But actually, they're not supporting me or giving, And so you sort of go, okay, maybe I'll start to make decisions differently around spending time with that person, or how much energy do I give? So it still happens. I remember when it first started to happen, a lot of people fell away, and friends that I thought were really close, and it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah.
But we're humans, right? We're built to feel emotion. So if it didn't hurt, then there's really something seriously wrong with me.
Yeah.
You're a narcissist or a psychopath or something. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was talking with a friend the other day, and she calls it a relationship audit. Doing right? That's what I did. I wrote it down. I'm like, I love that. I'm going to use that, a relationship audit. And it's true. And, people sometimes are in your life for a reason, a season, or, or purpose, or lifetime, and I've had to do that. And it is, and I'll tell you, those people that are no longer active in my life, I still love them. I still care about them. I wish them the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, excuse me, I parted ways with them with any, I didn't have any hate or hurt, it's just, we're just in different places in our life. And I certainly wish them the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same. Yeah. I'm the same. You do have to, it is a little bit of a training of yourself when you're first starting and people are falling away. You do feel hurt. So that, I know with a couple of people I felt quite hurt and bitter, but I've since healed that and forgiven myself and them for that. As I guess, I don't know, as you get older,
wiser.
Yeah, as you get older and wiser, I think that you can recognition, that awareness of self, that self-awareness, just awareness of what's around you and your energy and your body and emotions. It's such a gift to give yourself, because you can make decisions really quickly. You can see people for who they are very quickly. Your intuition, I think, really starts to grow because you're really tuning into your energy and your body and how you're feeling. And I think that it's a beautiful gift that you can give yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking of something. I just lost the thought. I hate that when I do that. It's really good. But what happens is I get this thought and then all of a sudden I start really listening to you and I'm like, wait, what was it I was going to say? Ah, darn it. Maybe it'll come back. It was something about relationships and just, I guess, the place I was at when that's what I was going to say. So the place I was at, when I was in my survival mode of friendships, I felt very alone, and I didn't enjoy my time with myself. And so I tried to fill it with people, and I was not selective sometimes on who I allowed in my life. And as I started evolving through the healing process, and I just realized this probably like a week ago, that I am not lonely anymore. And I don't know when that exactly, right? I don't know exactly when that switched. But something happened about a week and a half ago and I went, oh, wow. I can't even tell you the last time I was alone. And I would feel alone in a relationship. I would feel alone in a crowd. Right. And I would feel, and heaven forbid, when I was alone, that was too much. I had to, and so that is one thing that is really cool and really refreshing, is that I really do enjoy my own company. Now, I don't want to spend all my time with myself. Right. But it's so freeing, because that was such a, it felt desperate. It felt, it felt desperate because, like I said, I would bring anybody in my life because I just had to have someone there, and it wasn't always the best choice of friends in my life. Yeah.
And I can completely relate to that, because 2 years prior to my mum passing away and me being in that space, so I got divorced in 2010 and then kind of went on a bit of a bender for a couple of years. And in 2012, I stopped drinking. And for me, that was really life-changing, because I then wasn't masking everything with alcohol. And I started to have to really face a lot of stuff. And so I think in 2014, when I was dealing with the grief around mum and everything, I think everything else became so overwhelming, because I was becoming so clear in my head, having not had a drink for 4 years, that actually you've got nowhere to hide. You've actually really got to face it, because I couldn't mask it with alcohol. And I did start to withdraw, but I actually started to withdraw deliberately, because I realized I needed the time on my own as well. I needed that space to be in my own company, to start really reflecting and being honest with myself. And oh, look, there you go. I've got a new Mac, and there's a thing on here that every now and then I'll do something and I'll get balloons or fireworks.
Cute.
I don't want to turn it off because it's actually quite cute. But yeah, it's the learning to be in your own company and on your own is really important as well, because you learn so much about yourself. And one of the things that I do is, when I go for my walks through the day or in the morning, I decide on that day, how am I feeling? Do I want to listen to a podcast? do I want to listen to some music, or do I want to just be in my own thoughts? And sometimes I'll do some healing on myself, or sometimes I'll just be so present that actually I'm looking around and I'm touching trees. But I decide on the day of how present I want to be, and if I actually really want that time just for myself. So that's an easy way for people to get to have some alone time or me time as well, is going for a walk and then just not listening to anything, taking scenery.
Yeah. And just having some time with yourself and even your thoughts. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. And I love how you, and this is something I'm implementing in my life too, is how do I feel today? What do I feel like doing today? Do I feel like, do I want to go for a walk with the dogs? Or do I want to get on my Peloton? Do I want to, or maybe I don't, maybe I just want to go and stretch, but really tuning in, because I used to be so regimen and no matter what and now anymore, no, it's like, I'm going to listen to what my body's telling me today and how I'm feeling. And it's okay.
Yeah.
We keep saying that it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was like that yesterday morning. So I'm starting a new routine of getting up a bit earlier and going for a walk. Sometimes I just walk whenever I can fit it into my day, but I'm like, okay, maybe I'll get into a morning routine. But yesterday morning I woke up and I hadn't slept very well the night before. And I thought, you know what, I'm actually not going to. I'm going to take the time, turn off my alarm, and actually go back to sleep for another hour, because I needed it. My body was sore and I actually needed to restore. And this morning, then I felt so much better to get up and go for a walk, because I'd actually given myself permission yesterday
to rest.
So yeah, it's there's that fine line of having routines and doing the same thing all the time. There definitely is positives to that. For me though, I get really bored really quickly. So if I'm doing the same thing every day, I actually get really bored and I switch off. So for me, I need to sort of shift it up a little bit. And so maybe yesterday morning, it was my body also telling me have a bit of a break and a rest. So I listened to it. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. I didn't make any decisions. I just went, okay, well, obviously I need an extra hour of sleep, and I took it.
Yeah. Last night one of our dogs had to go to the animal hospital. He's fine. But so it was, a bit of a late night, and I'm an early bird. I could go to bed at 8:00 easily, because I get up really early. And today I had a one podcast already, and I've been busy. And so, right before, probably about an hour before before we started recording this one, I like hit a wall. I was like, oh. And so, you know what? I just set the timer, lay down for like 35 minutes and just rested, and then got on my trampoline. And and I feel so much better, because I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to be clear-headed, and I didn't feel clear-headed. And just that 35-minute rest, I think I dozed a little bit, but it was just resting, and I had no problem.
Yeah. And for me, it's one of the things that why I decided to go into group coaching with women, because I don't have children. I don't understand what a day runs like with having children. So I didn't want to be sitting there saying, well, you should be doing this, or what about this? Yeah. So the reason that I then started the group, one, because women love to feel like they're part of a community and a tribe, because we love to lift each other up. I love that feeling of, but also that I do then have a blend of women who have got children or don't have children, or children at different stages of their lives. So the ones that have got the smaller kid, that children can say to each other, well, this is what I do and it actually works. And I find that doing it in a group, it actually helps, because they can give each other tips that I wouldn't be able to understand or know myself. So, what works for me or you doesn't necessarily work for somebody else, but what we can do is plant the seed and work through, well, what works for you. And that's the way that I work all the time. It's it's a little bit like leading self. It's why I'm trying to teach it to so many people, because it's a quick tool, but then the way that you use it or you deal with it is up to you, however you want to use it.
Oh, yeah. And one big one you can put in your toolbox, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. In your toolbox.
In your toolbox. I know. I have one, and I love that example, because I really do. I have to slow myself down so I don't react. I have to catch myself, and I've gotten much, much better at it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love it. Love it.
Yes. Well, okay. So I've got one final question for you.
Mhm.
What do you want to leave with our listeners? What's one thing you want to leave with for our listeners?
You are worthy. You are enough. Just be you.
I love that. Seriously, take that in. Seriously. It's so true.
Mm.
Meditate on that for a little bit.
Yeah. And remind yourself of that. Remind yourself of that. It's something that I talk to people and tell people all the time, that I think that, and you know, it's not then just, oh, I say that to women, I say it to everybody that listens, because I know that it's not just women who feel like that, it's men as well, you know,
They just don't talk
particularly,
about it.
they just don't talk about it, or the vulnerability is too difficult to face, and they don't want to admit that they don't feel like they're worthy or that they're enough. And the reason that I put just be you is because authenticity is so infectious. The more authentic you can be, the more your beauty and your shine and your light comes out, because you're actually just being you.
And it is
And,
liberating. It is
oh,
absolute. The more
isn't
authentic
it?
you are, the more
Oh,
liberating it is.
it is. It really
You
is.
don't have to put up anything. You just be you, and that's
Yeah.
it. And,
Yeah.
you know, and it took me a while to find out who I was,
Mm.
you know, and I'm still on that journey.
Same.
But it's
Yeah.
fun. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Because you
Mhm.
learn new things about yourself and you think, oh, I never knew that about myself. Wow.
Exactly. That's one thing, you
And
know,
then,
like loving history. I didn't think I'd like history.
oh, there you go.
Mhm.
Mm. And I think the thing that I love is that I have this revelation about myself, and then I think, oh, I'm sure my sister or my brother or my mum used to say that to me all the time. You're really good at that, or you should do that. And you have this revelation, think, oh, actually, maybe they knew what they were talking about.
And then they're like, well, didn't you remember me telling you that?
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't hear that? We're infamous for that, right?
Exactly.
Oh, this has been a
Love
great
it.
conversation, and
Oh,
I love what you're doing. And I
oh.
tell everybody how they could reach out to you if someone maybe wanted coaching, or if they wanted to learn more about the leading self process.
Yes.
How could they reach out to you?
So I am on Instagram, and so on Instagram, so my business name is Wellness While Working. So I'm on Instagram under Wellness While Working. I'm on Facebook under Wellness While Working, or they can link in as well if people are professionals on LinkedIn. So they can either link in with me via my name, Megan North, or Wellness While Working as well. And I do have a website, so wellnesswhileworking.com.au.
And we'll have all that information as well for everybody so they can
Great.
access it. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much. This has been fantastic. And I'm
Thank
really glad
you.
that we even got on the subject of overwhelm, because I think that that's one that I, like I said, I lived many years not realizing that that's how I lived my life every single day.
Mm,
And
mm.
I don't anymore. And
Yeah.
it's so
And
much better.
I would just want to say to you that well done to you too for having the courage to do the work on yourself, because you know it can be overwhelming to look at how overwhelmed you are, but it's really beautiful to be on a journey and to hear your story too. I feel blessed
Thank
that
you.
that we've met and that we can have this conversation and be a shining light for other people.
Yes. And help other people. That's what we want to do. Shorten that
Absolutely.
suffering, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you, Lisa.